Life is objectively uncertain. So part of it comes back to resilience, which is being able to have something that has annoyed you, made you angry, made you anxious in some way, but then letting go of it and coming back to the place where you can eat and sleep and be joyful and happy.
Welcome to the You and You podcast with me, Sanjiv Sanger. If you enjoy this episode, please like or leave a review, maybe share it with somebody. Your support does really mean a lot and will help with sharing the podcast with others in the world. Each episode, we explore a word or a phrase and how it shaped our lives and what we've learned through it. Today's word is uncertainty, and I'm joined again by the lovely Evelyn Brody. Before stepping into the shamanic and integrated healing work, Evelyn built a career as an economist, a financial journalist, and communications executive. Lots of accolades there. Her journey into body-based and consciousness isn't about abandoning logic. It's about expanding beyond it. In our last conversation, we explored anxiety in the body. Today, we go a little bit deeper. Why do we equate safety with certainty? What do our bodies already understand about endings that our minds resist? And how can awareness of impermanence, even death, become stabilizing rather than threatening? This conversation is about surrender, presence, and what becomes possible when we stop fighting the nature of change. So, welcome, Evelyn.
Thank you.
Should we dive in?
This could get really deep, this one.
Well, we did say it's a little bit deeper than last time. Thank you again for joining me. Last time we spoke about anxiety in the body. Today, I'd love you to explore uncertainty. And how do you see the two connected?
Well, uncertainty, of course, does lead to anxiety. If we're not sure what's going to happen, what way things are going to go, what should I do? That does lead to anxiety in the body. And the body-mind are so connected. So when we have anxiety in the nervous system, that goes down into the endocrine system and into the hormones that are released into the body, which make us feel sad or unhappy or sick or agitated or nervous. So again, it's like we talked about before, it is the body-mind.
You speak about death as something that can bring people into presence. How do you introduce that gently in your work?
Well, death is a very interesting one in Western society because we have become so terrified of death. And people spend so much money trying to stay young and alive and but you know, life and death, it's part of the circle of life, is that we are all going to die at some point. I know there are transhumanists at the moment out there that want their brains to be uploaded to great Google in the sky or whatever. I can't think of anything worse.
It's quite interesting because you mentioned, like, in Western society, people obviously trying to not necessarily age, but how do you think Western society has maybe moved away from death and like kind of actually having open conversations about it? Because I come from a very different culture. What do you think the conversations are really like? Can you like expand a little bit on that about what's happened?
I mean, it's partly due to religion and particular Christianity, you know, heaven and hell, and certain religious figures, and particularly, you know, teaching people that you have sinned and therefore you ain't going to heaven, you're going to hell.
But then they don't necessarily go into those communities because then they're scared that they're going to be judged, I'm guessing, and then they don't necessarily have those conversations.
Other people, of course, have no spiritual beliefs now, and many people who are very materialistic just think that when the body dies, that's it. Dust to dust, ashes to ashes, the end of the body is the end of our consciousness. Now, many communities through the ages, such as your own, have absolutely believed that death is not the end of our consciousness. And the materialist scientific paradigm taught that, the end of the body is the end of consciousness. Consciousness resides in the brain. But that, thankfully, is changing again.
It is, isn't it?
We're coming out of that materialist way of thinking and far more into the old perennial philosophy that consciousness is primary. And there is so many even scientific studies now of near-death experiences and past life experiences that have been investigated and validated, and people going into altered states of consciousness through all sorts of methods, and through those altered states of consciousness realizing that the body is a vehicle for our consciousness, but it's not the end of our consciousness when our bodies die. And so there was one woman I remember recently who came to see me who was terrified of death, and she's had cancer, although it's in remission, but terrified of death. And I gave her a particular book to read, which is called Consciousness Beyond Life by Pim van Lommel. And the next time she came, she was just in a completely different place because she'd read that book and went, oh my God, why am I scared?
It's quite an interesting concept that kind of people, are moving, are starting to be a bit more open about the idea of life after death, consciousness, and how it carries on. And, we're not going to go into that too much, but that switch, because I suppose for me, obviously it was always around me, the concept of death. I've been to many funerals and, been brought up in quite a religious background. But then I was that person that was just like, you die. That's it. It's the end. And then I ended up on another journey to kind of go past that. And it's quite eye-opening when you go through that as an adult, the changes you feel about life as well.
There are, thankfully, I would say, there's a movement that was set up some time ago now for death cafes, and most significant towns, even, I'm not even just going to say cities, towns, there will be somebody holding death cafes.
What happens at these?
It's a place where you can just go and talk about death. Okay. And I've been to some of them, and some people are going because they have a terminal illness and want to talk about death. But some people are going because they've had loved ones die recently, or they're looking after people who have a terminal illness. People go for all sorts of different reasons, and there's no set agenda, there's no speaker. It's just little groups of people talking about death. It's not being swept under the carpet and ignored. And of course, there is the, I'm sure different people watching this will have different opinions, but there is the assisted dying bill, and whether we should have choice of some sort. And there are many countries around the world which have now started to allow, in very specific circumstances, assisted dying. And that's very much part of it. But of course, there's also vast resources spent at the end of life on keeping people alive who are going to die. You're not curing them. Nobody's saying they're going to be cured.
No, you just extend their life, and is that necessarily helping them? But that's quite a complex conversation because that's so loaded. I know how I would want to be. I probably need to put that into writing and have it sent out to all my siblings.
Yeah.
This is the plan.
Death plans, living wills needs to be put in writing so that people aren't standing or arguing over you as to whether the thing should be shut off or not.
I think what's nice about the death cafes is that people finding solace and comfort, we've been able to have that open conversation because it's so taboo still in society. I've probably had people, if I've talked about something like this, I've probably never heard from them again. I'm not even joking because it is quite a serious subject, and it's people don't necessarily want to recognize it, and the fear is still very real. Like the death cafes are very small, and it's quite, there's people that I know who are towards the end of their life, and you kind of have to constantly have to keep processing that and your feelings towards it. But it's how, that ability to be able to go into a meeting and just sit there and listen to other people's experiences, or, be able to actually have a conversation without judgment.
And there's an organisation in the UK called Living Well, Dying Well. Living Well, Dying Well.
Yes.
And there's a number of books. They do death doula training, and death doulas, just like birth doulas, will help people give birth. Death doulas will help people at the end. But a lot of the books on their reading list are written by people who work in palliative care, or a couple of them are written by people who have written books while they have been dying, when they've had terminal illness. And what keeps coming up over and over and over again, and it's what one of my teachers, Mac McCartney, talks about as well, he runs Embercombe down in Dorset, is live while you are alive.
It's so true. And we can forget that when we are in a state of anxiety and fear, as we did, we were discussing in our last episode together, because, you kind of get stuck in the moment and you're like, oh my God, this is just so awful. But actually there's so much more out there.
Live while you're alive. And most people, when they're on their deathbed, don't regret what they did. They regret what they didn't do.
Yeah, I think I saw a clip somewhere and someone was saying, oh, it was Jamila Jamil, like, this woman's fantastic. Everything she says, I just think it's great. But she was, I don't know if it was a clip that she'd reposted, but it was just like, what would the 85-year-old say to my younger self, like, to me now? And I think I need to start living by that myself. I'm not even going to deny it. I really do. I think I might live a bit more joyfully and a little bit more in the moment, because I know what that person would be saying. They'd probably be hitting me over the head with a bit of a stick.
And it's not about being hedonistic, of course. I just do want to make that clear. Live while you're alive, Mac McCartney adds to the end of that, and at the end of your days, whenever that is, what did you do for the children's children? And he doesn't just mean the human people. He also means the plant people, the animal people, the rock people.
The whole of the planet. It's what are you contributing to this place, or, while you're here? And we're in such a unique space on this planet. There's nothing that we can see out there that is like this. And
people need purpose. A lot of people are depressed and anxious, as we've talked about. Anxiety is prevalent because they don't really see a purpose. People need a purpose. They need community. And as soon as you start to see a purpose and see a community, you have a reason to live. And, we discount the elderly and, we stick them in homes in front of some ghastly TV program for hours on end. Whereas people who continue to have purpose, I'm not saying you need to work, down a mine or in Asda.
Is that what you're saying? You should put everyone that's older and send them down a mine. That'd be great. It's just so interesting, though, to have the conversation as well. But, like, if we're going back to, like, endings, what do our bodies already know about endings that our minds resist?
Well, our bodies often are where the sickness or illness is.
Yes.
And the mind is fighting it and resisting it, and that's not happening. Or, people ignore going to the doctor often. They don't want to know, but the body knows.
Yeah.
It's an interesting question, really. And I think it's so variable, I think, for each individual in some ways. It's hard to generalize on this because it really fundamentally, I think, depends on what one's belief is about what happens at death. And if you have an atheist or a deeply spiritual person or a deeply religious person from different cultures or faiths, you're going to get very different reactions and answers to that. I'm not sure that there's a one size fits all here.
Yeah, I think, like, what I've seen is where people maybe find a lump or something, and they're not necessarily diagnosed, but they're going through that stage. They very quickly start reevaluating their life, what they want to do in the future, if they are fine, if they're better, what they don't want anymore. And then they kind of make quite active choices. So in some ways, when you have that little like moment of like fear that comes in and going, oh, actually, I might not be here for much longer. Hope, generally speaking, they're well, which is fantastic. But it can really create some quite positive movements for them within their life and how they're leading it.
Absolutely. And there's the placebo effect and the nocebo effect. They go to the doctor, and there's loads of case studies written about it. They go to the doctor, they're told they've got cancer and they'll be dead within 3 months. And they literally just give up and they die. And when they do the autopsy, they didn't have cancer at all. And there's a lot of studies coming through now about the use of psychedelics towards end of life, people who have terminal illness. There's clinical trials being done in the US and I think in Australia and certainly in the UK at Imperial College and a number of other institutes and Bristol University. And when people are put into an altered state of consciousness where they see that there's something beyond life, they lose the fear of death, which allows them to live better and longer, because the fear is often what's in the body taking people down faster and impacting their relationships with those around. And suddenly when they lose the fear, actually, yeah, I'm going to die at some point, but I'm going to live while I'm alive.
Why do we confuse safety with certainty?
I guess it's that fear of change. So certainty, would probably mean no change, would be static, would feel safe. But actually, there's not much certainty about anything really in life, is there?
Everything changes because it depends on however, we're having this conversation now, and then it might be how you're feeling or I'm feeling or, the tone we might speak in. It really, I think, changes everything. But I don't know, there's I suppose certainty is maybe the monotony, like day in, day out. We know that this is what's going to happen and that's not going to change. And why do we confuse that with safety?
Well, I guess, again, it goes back into sort of the attachment bonds between people who are close. And we assume they're there. We have an attachment bond and we know we can call them or we will see them or we will have dinner with them, or if we need something, they are there. And that feels safe, that feels held, that feels taken care of. And then if they're gone, whether through death or they've left or the ways have parted or whatever, we don't have that anymore. Who are we going to call? Who are we going to tell?
What does feeling safe look like when life is objectively uncertain?
I mean, life is objectively uncertain. So part of it comes back to resilience, which is being able to have something that has annoyed you, made you angry, made you anxious in some way, but then letting go of it and coming back to the place where you can eat and sleep and be joyful and happy. So it's, again, I think we talked before about how these reactions are not bad things because they are survival mechanisms. So it's being able to have the survival mechanism to run when there's a bus coming down towards you on your bike or whatever it is. So being able to take the stress reaction, but then after it's over, not getting stuck in that, being able to come back, release it, let it go. I did the right thing. It's finished. And that's sort of resilience, is being able to bring ourselves back. There's lots and lots of ways. There's a very good thing, heart math, that people might have heard of, which is to help people recognize when they're getting stressed. and use the breath, use the heart to come back to the stable place. There's breath work. There's the shaking that we've talked about before. So there are lots of methods that people can use when they realize they're being triggered to help them come back. But of course, if people we don't know what we don't know. So lots of people are just completely ignorant about this. And so they can't have the tools because they don't realize what the problem is.
I've had it recently where I'm kind of going into fight flight mode, and it's like this. It's every 10 minutes. I'm kind of going, what is going on? How am I going to deal with this? And then like by the end of the night, by the time I get home, I'm like, oh my God. And I've actually gone, okay, maybe I need to start breathing again. But it's all these, it's your toolbox and kind of understanding, isn't it? Where like, why are you triggered? And was there any reason for you to be triggered? And actually, generally speaking, in my case, there wasn't. It's just the fact that I just need to see something in a slightly different way.
But it's also these ingrained patterns, because you've learned that maybe you will need to be triggered. Maybe in order to survive, you will need to run, or you will need to fight, or whatever it is. I'm not saying you personally.
No, just generally, yeah. Are you trying to encourage me to run?
And tapping, that's another thing that people often do.
Oh, yeah.
Is tapping on some of the meridians to bring themselves back into the centered space.
There's a whole technique around that. And I quite enjoy that, because I think that you do find a bit of a release. But I think it's very similar to the shaking, isn't it? Because there's something about the fascia, like, they're kind of releasing the embodied trauma within that. But I don't know much about that. I'm not even going to...
EFT is what it's called, emotional freedom technique. I don't teach it, although I have done it in workshops and things, but it's very specific meridians and places, and can be extraordinarily helpful for some people. So that's something that people can always look into as a resource.
Yeah, it's something that I've had in the back pocket, and sometimes I go into, and it'll be once in a while, but it's I find it quite nice as a 15-minute exercise just to bring me back in. But then I find, like, the other week I went to 2 yoga sessions, one after the other, and I was like, oh my God, I feel great. Even if you can do it for 5 minutes, it's amazing.
Absolutely. And there's, people tend to focus on the breathing meditation or the emptying the mind meditation, which breathing might be all right, but emptying the mind is not something that people are very good at. And so then they get anxious that they can't even meditate properly. And I think a good meditation for people who are beginners at meditation, well, 2 good ones are movement meditation, which can be ecstatic dance or 5 rhythms or something like that. Or it can be a mantra meditation, a seed thought meditation, like an affirmation. So it's giving the mind a single point of focus. So it's giving the mind something to do. And it's not allowing it to be the chattering monkey brain or, the hamster wheel brain. It's giving it something to do that's positive and focused. And that is a really powerful meditation, I think, for many people.
I've been told to surrender so many times, whether that's to a feeling or to an action. And I still don't know if I quite get it. How can people tell the difference between surrendering and giving up?
Well, there's a little cliche phrase, what we resist persists.
Oh, God.
And so, the more we try not to think, don't mention the war, don't mention the elephant in the room. Yes. But surrendering is definitely not giving up. Part of surrender, I think, is acceptance. We can't always change things, especially unfortunate things that have happened. People have died, people have left, we've lost our job, something's happened in the house, whatever. We can't change it.
But we can live in the past sometimes like this. I've definitely done that.
Ruminating on it and what if, should have, could have, is just disastrous. Yes. So part of surrender is, yes, that's what's here now. That's what I need to deal with. But that's definitely not giving up. And surrender actually might involve then a strategy of how to cope, which doesn't sound maybe like surrender, but it's definitely not giving up. It's like, that's what's here. That's what I have to deal with. That's what's happened.
Yes, it's such a big word though as well, surrender. We're taught it in such a different way when we're younger, because it's associated with history and playing games and that is essentially
White
stopping
flag.
Yes. And then now as an adult, like I'm probably a little bit black and white sometimes, and I'm just like, why do they keep telling me to bloody surrender? How do I let go enough to go, it's okay? Like, how do I do that? It's such a challenge in itself. Maybe.
And of course, there's really some inspiring stories about people who've been in dreadful situations, including concentration camps and prisons and all sorts of things. And yet they have used that time. They can't get out. But they've used that time either to learn and grow internally, or they've set up something within the prison community if they've been incarcerated to help others there. They have been of service, even though this is their very unfortunate circumstance. So again, it's not giving up, it's not inaction, but it's, I can't change where I am. I can't change what's happened. I can't change that I'm here. Let me still make the best of it. Let me use it.
That's pretty amazing, because that's actually creating, by them surrendering to that situation, say that they are in prison, whether they've done something wrong or not, or what have you, they've also given themselves that freedom, which is quite unique to be able to do that for any individual.
Whereas if they sit and bitch and moan and, get depressed and I'm never going to get out and not giving up, that's not helpful. That's not helpful. That just leads to anger or grief or depression or anxiety.
Well, okay, then now you're taking me back to my next question. What does dissociation look like in everyday life, not just in extreme trauma?
Dissociation is just not being able to feel the body, really. And often when people come to see me, I ask them, do they feel associated with their body, or do they feel they live mainly in their head, or do they live out there in La La Land? And some people love living out there in La La Land. And other people live very much in their head, but just a lot of people just do not really feel their body. And it's amazing. I can ask people to put their hand on their heart and feel their heartbeat. So many people can't feel their beating heart. I've had people jokingly sort of say, does this mean I'm dead? It's like, of course you're not dead. But they're just so used to not feeling. And we need to get back in touch with our bodies. And it can be nice to get guidance or, respite, wisdom by traveling out through prayer or meditation or whatever, altered states of consciousness. But at the end of the day, we have to come and live back here.
You help so many people in such extreme kind of circumstances where maybe traditional methods haven't necessarily helped them. Do you notice big changes in people, or do you find some people don't necessarily come back to you because actually not because the shift's been too much, but it's just too much for them to understand even?
People have to want to come, and I'm very blessed because I work in the private sector. So the people that come to see me want something to change. They're choosing to. They're not being sent. I will not work with people. Sometimes people want to gift sessions to girlfriends, boyfriends, mothers, sisters, daughters, whatever. Well, I have to hear from the person that they want to come to see me. Because if they don't want to come to see me, people are wasting their time, wasting their money. What's the point?
Yeah, because they don't necessarily believe in it, and they won't necessarily help themselves either, will they?
No. So people have got to want something to shift in their lives. Lots of people want quick fixes. Part of the problem, and again, there's a place for some medications for people who are anxious or depressed, but they were never designed to be taken long term. And they have, for many people, really bad side effects, and they're quite addictive, quite hard to get off. So sometimes if people are on very heavy medications, those medications are almost designed to keep them disembodied.
So how does an awareness of death change how people live, love, or prioritize?
I think you mentioned earlier, if people have had a brush with death or have had a diagnosis and then, have gone into remission, or it is, what will I do? What will I do with the time I have? What do I actually, people make bucket lists is the sort of the storyline is, what do I still want to do with the time I have available? And so many people put things off, of course. When I retire, when the kids have left home, when this, when that, when the other. And then tomorrow never comes in that sense. So I think definitely an illness can sometimes lead to a shake-up in people taking care of themselves, losing weight, going to the gym, finding a community to support them, or finding something meaningful to do.
What do people often regret?
There's a conscious dying exercise that I do sometimes with people at times, where you can do it with people who are genuinely dying, but you can also do conscious death and rebirth. Sometimes people do it for big birthdays, or there's been a divorce, or they've moved countries or whatever. So times of real significant change. And we have it as if people are on their deathbed and they can call in who they would want to speak to on the deathbed. And then there's a rebirth section of it if they're not genuinely dying, if we're doing it as death and rebirth. But it's, where is their unfinished business? Where are there people that you maybe didn't say I love you? Maybe people you didn't apologize to and you wronged them. Maybe people you want to question. Why did you do that to me?
Yeah.
But people won't necessarily get the answers that they want in that, will they? Or would like to hear?
Again, it's catharsis. And if you do believe in a consciousness that continues or reincarnation, I've had many clients who have died, but we have done significant healing, even though we haven't done curing. So we've done healing of the ancestral wounds, of the unfinished business. We have brought in a level of peace, and it's almost like the old confession thing, although it's done from a very different perspective. It's allowing people to say things they've never been able to say, to admit things perhaps they've done that they've never admitted, to admit faults. Because if you believe in a continuing soul or a spirit, if you don't do that, it carries on potentially to the next life, the next time round. If you haven't dealt with it this time, you're going to have to come back and do it again.
Great.
So let's do as much as possible of it now.
I did this training with you as part of Temenos Touch, and it was fascinating, and I loved it. Because I'd never done that one with you before, even though you have said that you've thrown the book at me. I'll never forget that phrase. But I did I find it useful? It was an interesting one, definitely, and I definitely enjoyed. There were some really nice positive aspects to it as well. So yes, it was about trying to clear the slate of injustices that maybe I felt like had happened to me. But there's something quite beautiful in that work. I think in all your work, there's some really nice, beautiful elements. And sometimes it does take a bit of time for it to land. So if uncertainty is unavoidable, what becomes possible when we stop fighting it?
Anything is possible in some ways. And it's to recognize that we do always have choice. Now, people might be faced with two choices that both look pretty bad, but there's still choice, and we are not in control of very much, really. Things always change, things always happen, and we can't necessarily impact everything around us, but the only thing we can change is how we react to it. And there's a story I sometimes tell people, you see people, if it's on the London Underground, somebody's thrown themselves under a train, so everything's delayed. Oh, stupid person, why are they doing that at rush hour? Getting really annoyed and angry. Or people going, oh, poor person, I feel so sorry that they felt they had to do that, and how ghastly for their family and their friends. Won't impact what time you then get to work or your meeting or your whatever you were going to. But the frame of mind that you're in, depending whether you're full of rage and anger and cursing how stupid this person was, or whether you're full of compassion for them and the ones that they left behind, that's impacting you. And it will then impact how you go into work, and it will then have ripple effects as to, I'm so sorry I'm late for this meeting, but this poor person on the train, and everybody will then react positively. Whereas, you go in full of anger and rage, everybody else is going to get pissed off because you're going to be radiating this negativity. But we can control how we react to anything. That's the only thing that is in our control.
So what would you want listeners to take away with them after this conversation?
If they're still stuck in a very materialist paradigm, I would encourage them to accept perhaps we don't know what we don't know.
Yeah.
And at least be open to doing some other investigation of many of the scientific theories that are around now about consciousness. And we are all going to die.
That's the only certainty, right?
So live while you are alive. Make the best of life. While you're here, you are here. Try to live the best life you can. And that's not in a hedonistic, selfish, narcissistic way. And consciousness is such a huge topic, and people mean such different things, but there is so much really good science. Consciousness was off the scientific agenda for several hundred years because materialism was there, science was there. Consciousness is just a construct of the brain. And there's technically things called the hard problem of consciousness, which is, that consciousness can't just be in the brain. And so more and more through post-quantum physics and non-locality, which is a technical term, more and more scientists are realizing that consciousness is much bigger than the brain. There's many institutes doing really good work on this. There's the Scientific and Medical Network in London, Institute of Noetic Sciences in the United States. There's loads of institutions doing work on expanded consciousness. And if you think that's all a bit weird and woo-woo, at least maybe don't shut the door to some research.
Well, let's go with weird and wonderful. Thank you so much, Evelyn, for joining me.
Thank you for inviting me again.
Uncertainty isn't something to solve, it's something to relate to. Maybe safety isn't about knowing what is coming, maybe it's about knowing that you can meet it and be okay with it. Thank you again, Evelyn, for bringing depth and steadiness to the conversation, and thank you all for listening. If this episode spoke to you, please share it and join me for the next time on You and You. Yay! Have a top-tastic day.